Technical redstone is intimidating. As I was working on this project, I had a realization. Despite my time and experience with the subject, I don't actually know how redstone works. On the surface, it might look like I have a strong understanding of redstone components and their interactions, but the truth is that there is often more depth to an interaction than I am aware of. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I have been interested in wireless redstone for many years now, but had always assumed it was beyond my reach in terms of knowledge and technical ability. This perception changed when I came across a video on the topic by the YouTuber and technical player Cubic Meter. While I would say that the video succeeds in its premise of laying out a rigorous foundation for the field of wireless redstone, my time applying what I learned made me realize that technical Minecraft has an accessibility issue. Between specific, complicated interactions and an abundance of technical jargon used to explain them, it often felt like building an actual working system was more like solving a puzzle. It also became apparent that most designs were built for use on servers, which typically run all the time, as opposed to single-player worlds. I figured that if I was having these issues, it was likely that many other people were too, and that's ultimately what led to this video. This technology is far too interesting and useful to be relegated to obscurity, so without further ado, let's get into the basics of wireless redstone. To start things off here, I'd like to give a little demonstration of the system in action. We begin 1,000 blocks away from spawn, and I'm going to load this stasis chamber with an ender pearl. The stasis chamber is connected to this wireless receiver, and we also have some additional redstone here for stability and chunk loading. Now that the receiver is running, and the teleporter has a pearl, I'm going to make my way back to spawn. Then, to show that the system is stable even if the world unloads, I'm going to log out and back in. Once I'm back in the world, I just need to give the system a few seconds to stabilize, and we should be able to send our wireless signal. The receiver is set to read a signal from this red transmitter, so if I hit this note block, I will be teleported to my destination in just a few seconds. Now that you've seen the system in action, let's explore a little bit of how this technology actually works. There are two mechanics which allow this kind of wireless redstone to be possible. The first concept we will look at is update order. Whenever two redstone components activate in the exact same game tick, there is a predictable order in which those components will activate. As an example, I've set up this little demonstration to show that a repeater will always send power before a comparator when they're powered in the same game tick. If we expand this idea, we can use different combinations of repeaters and comparators to control the update order of many components. This makes something called a tile set, which I use in this example to power an instant dropper line. Dropper lines are a convenient way to test if you have your tile set in the right order, as it won't send the item all the way down the line if the updates are out of order. The second mechanic we will look at is a little more obscure, so I built this simple contraption to demonstrate what is going on a little bit better. When I push this button, it activates these two droppers in the same game tick. They both shoot out items, which are allowed to rest on these trapdoors. The interesting part comes when I open the trapdoors. Despite being dispensed at the same time, the items do not fall at the same time, as shown by these pistons. In fact, the second item starts to fall exactly one game tick after the first item. Now if I come hit this note block, those same items will be dispensed, but there are 3 additional items being shot out as well. By controlling the update order, those 3 extra items are dispensed in between our first 2. This means that when I open the trapdoors, the first and second items will start to fall in the same game tick. Thus, we can use the timing of the items falling to detect if any items were dropped elsewhere in the world, creating the basis for signal detection across any distance. Did you catch all of that? If not, don't be afraid to come back to this section later. This stuff is confusing. Wireless redstone systems operate using 2 kinds of components: transmitters and receivers. The receiver is constantly checking for a signal by dispensing these items at a regular interval. When a signal is sent by the transmitter, it will dispense additional items that interrupt the order of items dropping in the receiver. The receiver detects this interruption, giving us an output signal. In order for a transmitter and receiver to communicate with each other, it is essential that the 2 systems are synchronized. This is done using a simple clock made with daylight sensors. Since daylight sensors run on a global timer, identical clocks will automatically be synchronized with each other. Using our tile set from earlier, we are able to create multiple channels of communication. With this design, one channel uses 3 tiles, meaning that we can get up to 8 wireless channels with this particular tile set. To keep things a little simpler, I built this setup which uses 5 of the available channels. If I hit one of these note blocks on the transmitter, you will see that the corresponding output on the receiver lights up. This will work if I hit any of the note blocks on the transmitter. There are a few other components which will likely prove useful if you want to build one of these systems for yourself. The Enderpearl stasis chamber gives you the ability to travel to any location in your world instantly, and is arguably the biggest justification for one of these systems. We also have this convenient component which acts as a login detector. When this chunk first becomes loaded, the Frostwalker boots on this armor stand freeze this nearby water, giving us a redstone signal. We can use this signal to stabilize our receivers when they first load into the world, by temporarily disabling the output's access to the stasis chambers. It also allows the chunk loader to automatically restart after the world is unloaded. The last component you'll need is some kind of chunk loader. I'll cover these in more detail in the second half of the tutorial, but I'll leave it at that for now. Up until this point in the video, I've been showing off this receiver design behind me. While it works well as a proof of concept, it is prone to random misfires, which make it unreliable. This wasn't good enough. The whole point of this project was to make a reliable system that was simple enough for a new player to build and use. So I got to work. As you can see behind me, I tested a number of design concepts trying to improve the reliability of the system, using various methods to try to slow down the item as fast as possible. After repeated failures and mystifying item behavior, I finally decided to revisit Cubic Meter's video to refresh myself on the mechanics and see if there was anything I was missing. And there was. Near the end of the video, it is explained that some systems are unreliable in single player due to the client randomly rehashing item entities. Bingo. If I could find a way to make the system reliably tolerate these client rehashings, that would in theory eliminate any random misfires, assuming that was the cause of the problem. I needed to set up an experiment to see if that was the case. This was the system I came up with. And after running it for over 24 hours with 0 misfires, I'm fairly confident I've solved the problem. If we let the filler items rest at the same time as the items we're detecting, then they will be able to maintain their order in the event of a client rehashing. With that problem solved, I'm super happy with how this system turned out. But for now, I think this introduction has gone on long enough. Now it's time to get building. Before we build, we have to first pick the location of our receiver. Make sure to note whether or not it's within the spawn chunks. Once you've figured out where you want to send your signal, we can begin. I have laid out the tile set that I'll be using behind me, and in front of me I've laid out 2 9x16 areas representing the size of the receiver. I'll be building the receiver in sections for simplicity, and the materials for each section can be found in my hotbar. A complete material list will be down in the description. Alright guys, so for the first section, I've marked a few dark spots here. They are 7 blocks in from the front, and that is just to mark out where we are going to place our droppers. So if we come a couple blocks up from the ground, we can start putting them in. We want to go 2 droppers up, and then we also want to do 1 dropper forward, like so. And then repeat that all the way across above all of these darkened blocks. And you should have something that looks a little bit like that. Then we're going to take some hoppers and we're just going to have them point into the bottom droppers like so. Next we're going to take some iron trapdoors and we're going to place them like that on the block above the hopper in the top section, and we want them against the side of the dropper. Alright, and then so we want to place glass blocks above the space there. So the items are going to shoot into that space, and then underneath these glass blocks we want to place large amethyst buds. So these are there because they have the perfect sized hitbox where the items will shoot out of the dropper, not glitch into them, and have their upwards momentum stopped as quickly as possible. So then we want to take a solid block. I recommend using these frog lights because they provide light and that just reduces lag a little bit because there are less lighting updates. And then we want to fill in around all of these chambers with our glass. And of course this can be done with any block. I just like using glass so I can see what's going on with the items. So for the next section we are going to build up the clock and a little bit of the wiring. So where I've got these pink blocks, that represents where our tile set is going to go. And so you can use whatever block you want for those. Personally, I just like those slabs. And if you want to use slabs, you can just add an extra 12 to the count down in the hotbar. And then after that, we're going to place 3 more slabs across like that. And then we want to bring them across like so in that kind of shape. And we want to take 2 glass blocks, come out backwards, and 1 more slab right there. Actually, we don't want one there. That slab will be replaced with a block like so, and we will have another block like that. Then we can just take redstone dust and run it along those slabs and glass blocks like so. Then we want to take a 2-tick repeater, place it coming out of the block like that. Then we want to take a couple of repeaters like so, then a couple of comparators right there. Then we're going to finish building up the clock, so we want an observer facing upwards into the block like so. And then we'll just place a temporary block there for now, break it. And on that solid block we want a redstone dust. Then we'll just bring a couple of slabs out like that with a redstone dust and a comparator. set to subtract mode like so. Then we want a couple of inverted daylight sensors going into those. Then with that, we should be able to add our sticky piston coming out of the redstone dust, and then a block to cover the daylight sensor, and we will have a working clock. So this will run on a global timer and will automatically synchronize with all other clocks of this design. So that's pretty handy. So in my hotbar, I've got the amounts you will need for the next section. We're going to build up some of the timings for the trapdoors and the lower droppers. Alright, so we're going to come to our back section here, and we're actually going to come right underneath, and right at the end of this open gap we want to place a downwards facing observer, one on each side like so. So when we come up, we can see their faces poking up like that. So then we want to take a couple of repeaters and have them facing into those observers, and we want a couple of powered rails right on top of them. Now I actually need to correct an error from the last section. This block needs to be replaced with a target block so it can redirect the redstone dust. And then we're going to come underneath the observers and place some target blocks right at the end of them as well. Next we're going to take some slabs, and we're just going to bring them all the way up to these frog lights here from the target blocks. And once we have those in place, we want to cover all of those slabs with 2-tick repeaters. Next we want to come underneath our target blocks, and we want to place a slab like so, and just another one on that side. And then we want to place a slab on either side of that, with some rails running across that as well. Then of course repeat that over here. Throw down a couple of rails. And then we want a few observers facing out of the rails and pointing into the droppers. And that's going to recycle our items right back up to the top. So I'll just finish putting those in, and that should be that section done. So if we were to turn on the clock here real quick, we should see the pulse starts to come through, our trapdoors start flapping, and our droppers start being activated by the observers. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start the wiring for the log out stability. So we're actually going to come to the back first, and we're going to take a couple of sticky pistons, and we want one facing up like so. We just want one facing over like that. And on top of the upwards facing one, we just want a cauldron with water inside of it. And then on this one, we can place a redstone block. Next, we're going to come underneath the redstone block, and we want to place a slab with a rail on top of it. Then we want to carry that a couple blocks towards the center, with a couple more rails. And at the end of that, we want to place an observer facing that way, and an observer facing that way. Next we'll come to the front, and on top of this center glass block we will place an observer, then a sticky piston, and a redstone block. Then if we come behind the observer, we want to make a little staircase of slabs, like so. We just want to bring it down so that it comes right between those two rails and at the end of this observer. Then we want to come to the top of the staircase and bring our powered rails down like so, and everything should be nicely not interfering with each other. Next we want to take a couple more slabs, and we want to come out from either side of this observer towards these target blocks. Then we just want to place redstone dust across the whole thing of slabs. And then finally we want to take our block and we want to place it right there to cut off those two redstone because we do not want them interfering with each other. Alright guys, so we're gonna wire up the next section of the stability. So we want to come out from the cauldron here with a couple of slabs, and on top of that we want a comparator and a 1-tick repeater. Coming out of the repeater we would like a couple of blocks going towards the front with redstone dust on top. And then this is a little bit tricky to place, but we want a line of slabs coming out from that block there, 4 long, and then we want that pointing into a block as well. So then we want to take some more redstone repeaters, 3 ticks, 3 ticks, 2 ticks, 2 ticks, and 3 ticks, and realistically those can be changed around if you like. And that will help to control that block, and that can actually be brought back to the starting position there if you like. And then we want to come down over here. We want a couple of observers pointing downwards beside the bottom piston. And then we want an observer facing into the top piston like so. Then on the bottom of these observers we want a couple of concrete blocks. So then underneath those blocks we would like some slabs and some redstone dust on top of those, and we want to bring that out to the back here. Then we'll use a few more slabs to make a little triangle shape like that. And we want a comparator pointing that way, a comparator pointing that way. Then we'll like a couple blocks like so, with redstone dust. You can also place in a piston right there on top of the comparator. Now we're going to finish up our login detector, so we want to take some glass blocks and we want to surround where that piston head is going to extend. And then on the center side we want to bring our glass out like so. We want a couple of stairs facing inwards like that, and then one more glass block on the corner. Then we can go ahead and waterlog those stairs. Those are going to be water sources. And then next thing we need to do is we need to get an anvil, some diamond boots, or whatever boots, and a Frostwalker book. You want to put that all together and put the Frostwalker boots onto the armor stand. Last thing we want to do is take a cobblestone wall or any kind of wall and place it on top of those observers there. And then we want to actually break and replace it so that those are in the correct state. And that should be a working login detector. We're just about there with the receiver. The next thing we need to do is build this little bit here, which is the detector. This will tell us if items are falling in the same game tick or not. What we want to do is we want to pick 2 of our dropper modules. We can go on either side. I will just replicate what I did on the other side, and we want to come out with some slabs, and we want to put comparators on top of those. Sometimes it can be a little bit annoying with the glass in place. However, we get our comparators on there, and those will be facing into some sticky pistons with blocks on top. Now those will go out into a couple more slabs like so, and we want a repeater on 1 tick coming out of those blocks. Then a thing of redstone dust on each tip there, and we want a target block to direct the redstone dust that way. And we can place a redstone torch on top of that. Then I place a solid block there, and then on the outside I want to place a redstone torch there. Then I want to use frog lights just because I like to be fancy and lag optimize a little bit. And so we're going to place them positioned like that, and we're going to fill up this top section of the platform with slabs. Then coming out of the frog light, we want a comparator facing in, one facing the other way, and this will make a pulse extender, and if that ever shuts off, then we know we've received a signal. And then our redstone block can be pushed into place to lock that up when we log out and back into the world. All that's left is to take your tile set from over there. You want to take the first and the last one from each, and you want to slot it right on top of that open section we left from earlier. So as you can see here, I've got the pink tile set from over there. And our system is running. We also needed to just top up the items in those bottom droppers, so we will come do that over on this side real quickly. I'll just grab some slime, and we'll put a stack in each of the bottom droppers. And this will ensure that there is plenty of items to go around. And then the last thing we want to do is a tile set, so I'll show you that real quick. In this case, we will take the red one, so that is 4cc and 32c, and c is just comparator. Alright, so we've got 4 comparator, and we had 3, 2 comparator. And then we just repeat that over on this side as well, so 4 comparator, and then 3, 2 comparator. And that will control the timings for all the items. And so if we just want to see the system in action, we can turn it on, and as you can see, it'll start spitting out items and cycling them through, and our redstone torch is staying off. Alright guys, and just to show you that both of these receivers are now working, I have set up some super simple transmitters in front of each of them, and all we have to do is place down a daylight sensor, and we should send a wireless signal. So we spit out our items, that lamp lights up, and we should see the same thing happen over here as well. So spits out items, lamp lights up. After some further testing, I found an edge case that led to a little bit of item loss. So to fix that, we're just going to take some more glass blocks and place them in just beside the trapdoors there, making sure everything is nice and contained. So just a final note for the receiver. If you want to shut it off at any time, the easiest way to do so is to actually take a solid block and come above this daylight sensor where the piston is pushing the block in and out, and actually place a block above it, and this will cause your system to, or your clock will lock itself up in that position, and then you'll end up with some items left on the trapdoors. Then you just want to take a couple of buttons, and then those can drop the items back into the system, and you don't get any item loss when you turn your machine off. Alright guys, so now that we've gone over how to build a receiver, we need to build a transmitter next, and this will send our signal to the receiver. So just as a demonstration, I will turn this one on real quick. This is using our pink tile set. And once the machine is running and our lamp is turned off there, we can come over to our transmitter. And we actually want to turn that one on as well by removing that block. And so whenever we want to send a signal, all we have to do is hit this note block here, and we will get a redstone output over on that machine there. So now that you've seen it in action, let's build it up. So our transmitter is going to fit in an 8x2 area, and we want to come to the front left corner, or actually either one of these front spots will work, and you want to place your note block one block up above the ground, and then an observer coming out of that. Then you want to take a couple of slabs. We want to place them underneath there with a couple of powered rails on top of that, and then a couple more observers facing upwards, and we want those going into a couple of solid blocks. Then beside the solid blocks we want to take 2 droppers facing upwards, and then we want to take 2 droppers facing towards the front. Then facing into the bottom droppers we want to place a couple of hoppers. Then we want to switch back to our slabs, and we want to come out of the top droppers 2 blocks like so. We want to take 2 blocks of glass, and then we can bring 2 more rows of slabs and 1 sticking out like that. Next we want to take 1 redstone dust, then we want a 1 tick repeater, and then a 2 tick repeater. Actually, we want to switch those. We want a 2 tick and then a 1 tick. And we want to do the same repeater pattern right beside it there, and then just a block right there. Then this space right here is where we are going to put our middle section of the tile set. Alright, next thing we want to do is build up the clock, so we're going to take an observer pointing up into that block. Then we want a dropper underneath that observer. Next we're going to take a solid block. We want to place that down and inside from the dropper, and we want redstone dust on top of that. Then we will need a sticky piston, and we will want that coming out of the redstone dust, and then a solid block at the end of the sticky piston. Then we will take a couple of slabs. We want those right beside that block there, with a comparator set to subtract mode and redstone dust. Then we just need a couple of inverted daylight sensors, like so. And this will make our clock. This will run continuously, and if we want to stop it, we just need to place a block there. All that's left to do now is put in our tile set, so we have 4, 1, and comparator, and we repeat that right beside it, 4, 1, comparator, and the last final step is to take some items and put them into the bottom dropper. So now that we've built up this receiver and it's running, we'll give it a little bit of a test, so we will break that block. We will start running this red receiver here. Now that it is up and running, we should be able to hit this note block and send a wireless signal. Perfect. If you are building your machine outside of the spawn chunks, I recommend building it so that the boundaries of the machine are all contained within one chunk. This will just make it easier to chunk load and you'll run into less problems. So if I hit F3 and G, that will show chunk borders, and as you can see I have built this receiver within this chunk, and the same with this one as well. Now that we've built both the transmitters and receivers, the last thing we really need to talk about is chunk loading. Essentially, when you log out of the world, everything except the spawn chunks will not be loaded when you relog into the world. So in order to turn on your wireless redstone again, you need to load those chunks. Now, since the spawn chunks will always be loaded as soon as you're logged into the world, you can use the login detector from earlier and then send a signal through a series of chunk loaders, and that will give you the ability to load the chunks where the receiver is located. And then once those chunks are loaded, you can run a little clock that will keep them loaded. So right now we are starting off in the spawn chunks, and so this is where we're going to build our login detector, but first we actually need to lay out our portals. So if I go through into the nether here, you can see that I've set a few of them up already. So the red one is my spawn portal, and then if I turn on the chunk porters here, you can see that I've got these portals just on the very edge of the chunk, and that's just for consistency and keeping track of it, but also so I know kind of where the portal is positioned in the chunk relative to the rest of it. But anyway, so we start to set up a few portals down the chain, and sometimes it can be a little bit tricky and they like to interfere, so you have to move them around, but it's very important to make sure that each portal in the nether synchronizes with its own unique portal in the overworld. And then as long as they're spaced out in the nether like this, it doesn't really matter where they are in the overworld. And of course, since I forgot to mention it before, we definitely want to do this on the nether roof. It is way easier, but you definitely don't have to. I will leave that choice up to you. Alright, so I'll show you how to lay out a portal in the chain. So we come into our next chunk over, just go into the corner and build a portal. It's actually incredibly simple. So I'm gonna do that really quick, throw down my little obsidian thingy, and then just to mark which one it is, I'm going to use light blue for this one. So I'll just throw those in the corners, and then we will light the portal, hop through, and see where it takes us. And there's the problem right there. So we have come through the green portal. So the solution to this, we can try to move the green portal over a chunk, which I should be able to do just fine. Alright, so we're going to say that that's our old green, and that is our new green. So if we break that and light that, we come through at green. This is good. Okay, so now if we go back through green, you're at green. Okay, so this portal should not be working. Good. So now that we have moved green, we definitely want to test out yellow very quick. Make sure that it's not interfering. Good, yellow is still with yellow. So yellow works, green works. Now we go back to our blue, and we see if it connected up again. And it did not, so you can see that we got a brand new portal here. You can actually see the green one over there, and so now we can mark this portal with blue, then we can move on to the next portal in the chain. It's also good to go back if you can. Interesting visual glitch there. So go back to the green one here, and now we can take out these old portal remnants just to keep everything nice and clean. So this is the chunk loader design that I recommend using for this kind of setup. So what you have here is you've got a dispenser with a minecart inside of it, and I'll show you if we hit this button. We'll send that minecart through the nether portal, and then the minecart will come back, be broken by the lava, and get put back into the dispenser. So I'm not going to do a block by block tutorial for this part. You can see exactly how it's built here, and I will show you the nether side as well. It's almost exactly the same, except you will see that instead of a powered rail beside the lava, we have a detector rail. And that is an important little nuance to take note of. If it's a detector rail, the minecart will come back automatically. However, if it's a powered rail, it won't activate the dispenser, so the minecart won't come back. Now this is important for one-time use systems, so if we go back here, we can see that every time we hit the button, we can activate the chunk loader system once. And so this is useful for restarting our system. We can build our login detector right here, activate our dispenser, and that will start sending our chain of minecarts. So now I'm going to show you how to hook up one section to the next. So we've got our little chunk loader here, and what we want to do is we want to come underneath the dispenser and place a receiver. So when the dispenser is activated, indicating that the chunk loader is running, has been triggered, that will activate this observer, and we want to send that into a block. And then we just want to take some redstone, a repeater, and some dust, and we just want to go into the obsidian there. Then we can take a repeater output from the other side of the obsidian. Be careful not to jump into the portal. And then we can run some more dust. The next thing we need to do is build one of these modules over on the next portal over. Alright, we'll just build that up here. So we've got a glass block, redstone block, and a couple of glass down and up as well. Then we want to take a dispenser and point it that way with a couple of rails coming out of it like so. Then we want to take some more rails. We only want the one block up. We want a hopper facing down into the dropper, or dispenser I mean. Then we want to take two more hoppers into the side of those. Then we want to take some glass, and we want to encase the space above the hoppers. Make sure no items get out on us. And then we want to take our powered rails. We want to run them all the way down. And so on the nether side, we always want to have powered rails, except for the first one. So we have powered rails there, and next thing we need to do is grab a lava bucket, and we want to fill that slot, and we want to take more glass and just cover that all up. Alright, so now we're going to continue this chain that we've got going from before. So we want an observer facing downwards from the dispenser like that, going into a block with a repeater. And I actually recommend adding a number of ticks to these repeaters. I think 8 is probably a comfortable window, just because we want to give the minecart time to go through the portal before the signal is sent through here, because that way we know that the next chunk is loaded. This shouldn't be a problem because the previous chunk should cause this chunk to be able to process redstone and just not entities. However, just to be safe, I like to add a little bit of extra delay. So I'm going to repeat that on the first one as well, and then we're just going to continue this process. So we have our redstone line coming out of the previous portal, and we just want to run that up into the dispenser. So just a couple of blocks like that will be good, and you can run your redstone up like that. Then a little bit of redstone dust coming from those repeaters into the chunk loader portal, and then you repeat that process all the way down. So now for the other side of this portal, we want to come through it. Actually, a good thing to do before you go through the portal is to actually put a minecart into the chunk loader itself, and just put a temporary button on the side and shoot the minecart through. And that way when you go through the portal, you know exactly where on the portal the minecart came out. So then we just build the same thing we built on the other side here. And it's important to note that on the overworld side, we want to place a detector rail instead of the powered rail right above the dispenser like so. So we connect all of those up, and we'll fill our glass back in as well. And then we will replace our lava bucket, cover that up as well, and then we want to put a minecart into that dispenser. So that should be everything we need built up on this side. If we come back through, if we were to hit this button, we should see nothing, because there is no minecart in there. However, if we take a minecart, plop it in there, and send it through, we should see the minecart come right back. Alright, all you have to do is repeat this process as many times as you need until you get to the location in the overworld where you want to build your receiver. Okay guys, so you've built up your big chain of chunk loaders, and now you've gotten to the end, and this is where you want to set up your receiver. Once you're back in the overworld, you want to turn on your chunk borders, and just make a note of what chunk that your chunk loader is in, because one of the chunks beside it is where your receiver is going to be placed. So, the only thing you really need to do is actually make your portal one block wider than the rest, and what we're going to do is actually replicate this exact same system again, but just right beside it. So I will do that real quick. And then you should end up with something a little bit like that. And now the reason we're doing that is so that portal will get loaded for the first time, and then this chunk in the nether will keep itself continuously loaded. So we want to build this same system again on this side, and then what we're going to do is actually hook it up to a hopper clock. So I will build up this other chunk loading loop here, and then I will show you how to build the hopper clock. Okay, so now we're going to hook up our hopper clock to this second module. So we want to take a solid block, we want to leave a 1 block space between the dispenser and the block, then we want to leave 4 blocks of space before another block. Then we want to come underneath, and we want to give a block diagonal like so, and just a comparator pointing into those blocks like that. We want to grab a hopper, and we want them pointing into each other so that the comparators are reading the hoppers. Then beside each comparator we want a sticky piston pointing inwards, and a redstone block to be shuffled back and forth. Last thing we need to do is take a block there, and put some redstone dust on those to power the pistons. Then we want to put 12 items inside of the hopper clock. So now that that is running back and forth, we can take our redstone torch and apply it to that block right there. And we want to make sure that our chunk loader actually has some minecarts in it. So we put minecart in there. We should see that it triggers right away. There we go. Here's our minecart back. Perfect. And that will continuously keep that chunk loaded. So now that you've got your chunk loading line all set up, the last thing we need to do is the initial activation. So whenever you log into the world, we will need a login detector to send a signal to this dispenser and start up the whole initial system. So I will build that up for you real quick here. Let's see, I want to grab a solid block here. I'm just going to put that there underneath the dispenser. And we're going to have an observer that points into that. And we're going to have a wall in front of the observer. Then we can take a glass block, and we want to fill in the corners of that little square, and a couple of stairs. Then we're going to come underneath the wall, 2 blocks, we want to place a solid block, then we want a downwards facing observer, so I'm going to just crunch down here, like so, and that points down into that block. And then right beside that block, we want to take a sticky piston facing upwards like so, and then we can fill in that spot with our glass. Then all we have to do is take a water bucket. We want to waterlog the 2 stairs there. Then we want to take an armor stand with a pair of Frostwalker boots, and that should complete the login detector. Now that our chunk loader's all set up, I have taken a structure block and saved one of our receivers, and we're actually going to go to the end of our chunk loading line here, and we're just going to throw it down a receiver. We're going to make sure everything's working. So first thing we want to do is pull up F3 and G. We want to make sure we're in a chunk beside the chunk loader chunk, and we've done that. Now I need to be careful about my orientation here. So which way is positive? So that was positive, and that way is positive. So that way, and that way. Okay, so I want to come to this corner. Right there instead. So we will load A. And that's better, that'll put us within our chunk. So, load that in. And as you can see, we have a receiver, so if I put away all this junk clouding the screen and get rid of that. Oh, that's okay, it can be a little high. Alright guys, so before you run a test, it's always good to make sure that your components have been placed correctly. I used the structure blocks to place a receiver down over here, and I forgot to turn on the entities so I didn't get my boots. And then this rail down there actually met up with these ones going across the bottom, and that caused an issue there. And with a finicky system like this, it's very important that all of your components are oriented correctly. Now, with that said, we also need to make sure that our chunk loader is working correctly, and I actually came across a case where logging out of the world caused the chunk loader to actually freeze up. So I've added these 2-tick repeaters underneath coming out of the dust. They should only ever turn off if a dust is off for more than 2 game ticks, or 4 game ticks I mean. And then the repeater will turn off, updating the piston. So hopefully that should keep the hopper clock always able to run. And with that said, everything should be ready for a test. So, we've got the Ender Pearl stasis chamber right here. I'm gonna throw my pearl. Perfect, and now we're going to teleport back to spawn. Excellent. Alright, so now we've got the receiver running over there, we're back in the spawn chunks, and we can log out. And log back in. So now our chunk loader is going to take a moment to get going here, and then we're going to need a few seconds for the system to stabilize itself. So, I don't know, give it maybe 20-30 seconds to be safe, and then we should be able to hit our note block here on the transmitter and teleport back to where I placed my pearl. So let's give it a shot. Perfect. And so that is the system in action. So as you can see, we have logout stability, and everything is working good and reliably. And that about does it, guys. We've gone through how to build a receiver, we've gone through how to build a transmitter, and I've showed you how to set up your chunk loading. That's all you really need. Hook it up to a teleporter and you can get to your end portal in no time. Hey guys, I just wanted to say thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. I've been trying to improve the quality of my content, and feedback is an important part of growth. So let me know what you thought with a comment or like down below. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed as well. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. And on 3, 2, excuse me.